Well, welcome to A10 again. He again, Kogan, and we're talking about the effects of the Spanish-American War, but we'll kind of do a little bit of a review of the causes, only because there's cool documents to go along with it.
Yeah.
I mean, there really is. I mean, I'm not an artist. I can always appreciate, I guess I get distracted. Ooh, shiny things. I love the color of it. So,
and it's really like the first war that we fight outside the United States
on two fronts,
since the Mexican-American War.
Yeah.
And really that it was like, was it really Mexico or was it really?
Right.
I mean, we do push to Mexico City, but
we had ships leave Texas to get in there, but it really,
it's the first time
it really was
going somewhere to fight.
Yeah, we are legitimately
going
on
somewhere
bags,
else. Yeah.
And going somewhere. So of course we'll get into the causes. We'll review the causes again, but wars declared against Spain after the sinking of the Maine. The thing that we didn't bring up.
You rhymed.
Oh, I did, finally. The thing that we didn't bring up last time when it came to the sinking of the Maine, since we have that whole thing exploding there, we'll talk about it. They thought that the Spanish did it. However, years and years later, and I want to say 1995.
It was like the 70s, they reopened a commission
Yep.
that finally determined it was a accidental explosion inside the ammunition storage, which was next to the boiler room. Like, that's a good place to put explosives.
Right.
Next to the room that, like, you're burning fire and heating the engines in. Yeah.
However, due to the circumstances, things weren't going well with Spain. We wanted to help them out. Things weren't going well in Cuba.
You needed a scapegoat.
Yeah. And it was just the circumstances. The ship blows up. We're not getting along with Spain at this point. They had to do it.
Yep.
Not to excuse it at all. In the absence of an investigation, but just some of the things that we could touch on when we're looking at the reviewing the causes. Of course, we talked about those reconcentration camps that General Weyler were putting people in. So they have the damsel in distress over here, the Cubans looking to the United States to come and help them. And something we indicated in the last one, we would sympathize with people who are going to rebel or revolt against harsh rulers. Again, I like this as well. Spain, and
that like the mustache, villain,
the diabolical mustache, and that's the thing too with these cartoons. That there's definitely, you can definitely tell who the good guy and the bad guy is in this one. Here he is, the prince or the knight in shining armor without the armor. Here saving the damsel in distress. Love it though. Of course, we talked about the Maine and how it winds up arriving, and how it winds up arriving and then ultimately winding up exploding. And that's when we get into it. But this could be a whole separate discussion just on propaganda and how we have to get the public on board and how we are now going to view our new enemy, Spain. If you look here at this cartoon, here is somebody representing Spain in here with all the blood, the knife, and the headstone saying Maine sailors murdered by Spain. I mean, this is definitely going to be, and then of course the U.S. flag on the ground.
And you got, even this creature that's supposed to be Spain with less than human-like characteristics. Sure. Fang, much longer arms in proportion to their body, giving almost like a gorilla.
Yep.
Character.
Yep.
Caricature.
Yeah,
that word. We see several American soldiers. We know they're American by their blue uniforms, murdered, blood all over their hands. Yeah, and he's standing on the flag. Like that's like.
And this is not going to.
Yeah,
this is not going to be the first political cartoon we see where we're depicting our enemy as somebody that's a savage and less than human. You'll see that with Germany in World War I and World War II.
You see it throughout history with any group you're trying to depict as less than human. Like we saw it with slaves,
sure,
and the freedmen. We saw it with the Chinese immigrants. We saw it with Native Americans. We see it all the time.
Not accurate depictions, but we need to make somebody look even more like a propaganda. Again, the other thing as well was that's a big cause of the Spanish-American War was this yellow journalism. Some of the things we indicated is that newspapers wanted a war. It was something to write about.
And really that also, not just that the newspapers want a war, but one lesson we learned from the Civil War, because the Civil War is the first war fought after the advent of the camera, that in American history, you can no longer fight a war without public support.
No.
Because now we're that's what war looks like. Well, I need to take a step back. I don't want my son, my dad, my brother, my husband going into that. Right. That you now, as a president, as a country, you now need to get the public on your side as to why you go to war. And that's another role that yellow journalism plays in this.
So when we get to the causes, I think we went through all those. U.S. interests are there, the Spanish atrocities, the sinking of the Maine, and then, of course, the yellow journalism. Now we're going to fight this war on two fronts. We're going to fight it over here in Cuba. We're going to fight it over here in the Philippines.
I really wouldn't call it fighting.
Yeah.
We're going to win.
A first-round knockout.
Yeah.
4 months. When we start to talk about the Panama Canal later on, one ship was heading to Cuba to provide support during the war. They left the west coast of the United States. They had to travel all this way because there's not a canal there just yet. They had to travel all the way down around South America, come back up, and then come over there. By the time they got there, war was over. So that just gives you an idea how short it is. However, it was fought, on two fronts. When we look here, of course, preparing soldiers, and what are you going to need? You're going to need soldiers here. Of course, you're going to need that Navy, something that Alfred Thayer Mahan was hinting at that we needed to expand. So we're definitely going to need our Navy over here. Two different areas. Now we're looking at, in terms of climate, it's going to be a hot region.
Here's the tropics.
Yep.
It's south of the Tropic of Cancer. You're in tropical zones.
A lot of mistakes are going to be made in this war by soldiers on the ground. When we're looking at the conditions, when we're looking at the food that they were eating as well. You got to remember this is the 1890s. The Meat Inspection Act and what they reviewed, what they found out about meat at this point in time.
Wasn't in effect yet.
Wasn't in effect, and most of the sicknesses and the things that slowed soldiers down was the nasty meat. So that's just.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I believe more soldiers die of disease.
Yes.
Than actual combat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course, the uniforms. Quite a few of the uniforms made of wool. That's really not something you're going to want to do there.
Yeah, like blanket soldier. I don't think you're really going to need a blanket.
Nope. Nope. So when we're looking at the terrain they're going to be in. Again, we're going to have a force going on to Cuba, so we're going to be on a ship, and then you're going to have soldiers that are going to have to get onto the land itself. That's going to provide some dangerous situations since the enemy is then waiting for you. Here's just another picture of just the terrain itself. But this is an even better one. We're looking at the painting, and we'll get back to the Buffalo Soldiers. This is what's ahead of them, and this is, of course, is at San Juan Hill. You're going to have the enemy at the top, or enemy sitting there waiting, and you're going to have soldiers going out there, going up this particular hill, fighting really with nothing to go behind. But when we're looking at the soldiers that were involved, what we have to remember is that throughout the year, segregation is always going to be in the background. So you're going to have white units, and you're going to have African-American units. And in this instance, with this war, you had the group that was referred to as the Buffalo Soldiers.
Yeah, they come to prominence during the Indian Wars.
Yes.
Many African Americans after the abolition of slavery, found, I don't want to say refuge, but found like the army as a job. I can volunteer. You're going to pay me. You're going to give me clothes. You're going to give me food. You're going to give me shelter. Right. I'm going to become a soldier. And one of the first things the army does with the freedmen soldiers was separate them into a separate unit.
Yep.
And then send them out to fight the Native Americans.
And the Native Americans were actually the ones that gave the African Americans the nickname Buffalo Soldiers. They wore these buffalo coats. The Native Americans had a lot of respect for them as well because they fought pretty hard. These were tough, no-nonsense kind of guys, and you had to be tough and no-nonsense. You're in a segregated unit. You have to prove yourself. You're seen as inferior, so there's always that needing to prove yourself that they had within.
You either were a slave or you're a descendant of a slave.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that way, if you're fighting with a little bit of a chip on your shoulder, that's why. Yeah. But you had the separate units. And you see them again training. And this is kind of what the battleground would look like. Again, not a lot of photos from here, but you have a lot of paintings that can give you an idea. Again, moving uphill, nothing really to hide behind. I'm sure there's a great story behind this painting, but this is just giving you an idea of the terrain that they were fighting in. When it came to landing, we're talking about San Juan Hill. Again, in Cuba, they're going to have to get there by boat and, of course, get off, and then that's where the fighting would start.
And end.
When we're looking at it, lasted only 4 months. You have it taking place in the Caribbean and the Philippines. We have the Buffalo Soldiers. The one we're missing him, there he is. Theodore Roosevelt, even though we kind of bounce around covering him, there's your guy. So if you follow Long Island soccer or professional soccer, there's a name of a soccer team. They're called the Rough Riders. Theodore Roosevelt was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy at the time. And when we go back to one of our quotes in our earlier lesson, this was a guy who felt that we needed a war.
Yeah.
And, the other quotes that we mentioned, those guys didn't get their hands dirty. This guy actually did. Theodore Roosevelt quit his job as Assistant Secretary of Navy. He winds up forming this group, the Rough Riders, and they get
personally recruits many of the people he had spent time with out in the Badlands.
Yep.
The Dakotas.
Cowboys, Cowboys, college students, people seeking adventure.
I love the story of the Rough Riders because as they're getting ready to go to Cuba, the boat didn't have room for their horses.
Oh, yeah.
So although they trained as cavalrymen on horseback, they couldn't bring their horses with them to fight. So only Roosevelt was allowed to bring his horse.
Of course.
And the rest of the men were like, you got to now become an infantryman.
Do I have a picture of him on his horse somewhere here? No, I don't. But
maybe that's him.
This one could also be him as well, I think, when we're looking at the paintings. But, again, when you're looking at the terrain and what they had to endure, again, this was a quick battle, but, bullets did fly. People did get hurt. We also had a really secured quick victory in the Philippines as well. Commodore Dewey sails his fleet into Manila, and they pretty much gave up real quick.
Yeah, that the story of this. You're a naval historian. Little bit, surprise attack in the morning.
Yeah,
he sails into Great White Fleet, which now Industrial Revolution. We've now mass produced new warships.
Yep,
and it was sun comes up. Oh my God, there's the U.S. Navy. War's over.
Yep, done. When we're looking at how quick this was, this winds up becoming known as the Splendid Little War. And when we look at what we wind up gaining from it, again, a first round knockout, we gain control of Cuba and, we have a lot of influence in the Caribbean now. And the same thing with the Philippines. So when we're looking here, we move forward, and Guam, yeah. And to this day, we have military bases in the Philippines, in Guam, in Cuba, and it's from this war. And even look at this political cartoon. There's Uncle Sam with this big. It almost looks. I always think beach ball, with a little kid.
Yeah, just wrapping around his arms around the world.
It's mine. I'm not going to share. Now is he going to let go? If you think he will let go, you don't know him. And again, this is something that winds up appearing after the Spanish-American War. Quick first round knockout. We miss anything?
Nope.
There's so much you can go into with the terrain, how they got there and everything. But, when it comes to getting the causes and effects, down and dirty with it.
Easy win.
Easy
win.
Thank you for watching.